Want to watch a movie that gives Temu Hunger Games? It's 2044, and the world is in chaos. Different religious groups have been fighting for dominance, and the violence has shaken the world. So basically, 2025 and the next 4 years. An influencer, Fix Huntley, comes up with the idea that all religious groups should send their representatives. Then the participants will fight each other, and the religion of the winner will be the religion of the rest of the world. This way, the world will finally have peace. They will call it the Battle for Absolute Dominion. Surprisingly, countries and religious groups have agreed. In 2064, a Fuan young man named Sagan Bruno is training with Anton, his coach. Sagan will be joining the wildcard tournament and taking his shot at becoming the champion. His adoptive father, Dr. Bruno, is meticulously monitoring Sagan's vital signs. There have been instances of him suddenly spacing out, and they don't know why. That's called brain rot from watching too many Tubi movies. 20 years after he came up with the idea, Fix Huntley can hardly believe that his suggestion was taken seriously. He invites Professor Amanda Harris to discuss what life will be if any of the fighters win. The top fighter is Ammon Jones, a Pensonite. Pensitism has an apocalyptic ideology that the world will end in 2111. These groups will likely refuse progress and just live as if we're in ancient times. The rank 2 fighter is Nizar Haddad, a Dashafari, a religion that doesn't celebrate Christmas. A world without Mariah Carey season seems depressing. The third is Mestre Ganto Santo, a Celestian, who doesn't celebrate Ramadan or Hanukkah. These three have defeated all opponents to reach the top. Professor Harris commends Fix Huntley, saying that it was his idea of the tournament that stopped the world from destroying itself. A day before the wild card tournament starts, Anton, Dr. Bruno, and Sagan all head to Shalom Stadium. However, while still on the train, Sagan spaces out again, and they can't snap him out of it. Because of the cameras, they try to make it look like he's just asleep. Luckily, Sagan wakes up just before the train stops. The place is packed, and Salon, the host, welcomes all viewers and participants. Salon is giving Frankie Grande. These fighters don't have ranks, but if they pass the wildcard tournament, they will qualify to compete with the top 50. It starts with the group draw, and Sagan quickly defeats all of them without breaking a sweat. These fights are really homoerotic, and Salon is here for it. One of Salon's reporters, Claudia, mentions that Sagan already broke a lot of records, such as most fights won in the least amount of time without a single KO. They figure that it's Sagan's style to have his opponent tap out instead of knocking them out. Sagan is a representative of IHS, or the Institute of Humanism and Science. They are not religious, hence the Carl Sagan name reference. This grabs Salon's interest, and he orders that Sagan to be monitored closely. Anton reveals that Dr. Bruno and the board hired a PPO, or a personal protection officer, for Sagan. Shalom Stadium has a lot of security, and everyone is pre-screened, and only the top 50 usually have PPOs. But because 8 fighters have already been killed since the tournament started, Dr. Bruno wants to take precautions. Bruno's wins have made him famous quickly. Commander Zimmer, military officer in charge of the tournament, questions why the IHS never sent anyone before. Her assistant Nigel explains that since the members of IHS are scientists and not for combat, they instead spent 20 years engineering their representative. Sagan is the result of that, from the sperm of a super athlete and the embryo of a genius. Zimmer doesn't want a godless fighter to be their champion, so she orders Nigel to stop Sagan from winning. Sagan's next opponent is Sami Oda, a friend of the rank 2 fighter Nazar. Even when in a headlock, Sami refuses to give in, and Sagan spaces out again, as if in a trance. When he snaps back into reality, he whispers something to Sami to get him to tap out. Everyone wants to know what Sagan whispered, but there's no way of finding out.
Hey, how you doing, little mama? Let me whisper in your ear.
So Salon orders Claudia to find out anything about Sagan. Sagan's PPO, Naya Olinga, finally introduces herself. Because Sagan has caught everyone's attention, the threat against him has increased. Naya tells him to be cautious. It's obligatory for fighters to walk past the press line on their way to the hotel, and refusing is grounds for disqualification. So despite the danger, they have to walk out in the open. Waiting in the room is Sagan's mother, Professor Sitara Bruno. Sagan asks to talk to her in private. When Naya asks Anton about this, he reveals that Sitara never really paid attention to Sagan even when he was young. This has damaged their relationship. He adds that the IHS asked Sitara to be an egg donor. She was a world champion gymnast and a Rhodes Scholar. She refused. So the IHS offered her husband, Dr. Bruno, to head the entire project, which made it easier to get Sitara to agree. The sperm donor, however, is anonymous. As Sagan heads to the arena, Sitara shares with Dr. Bruno what Sagan told her, unaware that Claudia is listening. It turns out that Sagan is only pretending to space out. He does this because he doesn't want to admit what's really happening. Apparently, someone's talking to him, and he thinks it's God. Salon wants the story to be published, despite Claudia's warnings that it's a conversation with Sitara, who is a psychiatrist. So Salon makes it look like the story was leaked by a different news site. Meanwhile, Naya gets Sagan to the arena with the help of a friend, Steph. I just know Steph and Naya are scissoring. Sagan fights another opponent, but he's big back this time. When his opponent loses, Mr. Big Backery still continues to fight, so Sagan squeezes his cheeks. The news about him hearing God is shared online. People laugh at him, but he just shrugs it off. The two train together, and these two look like they finna scissor. Anton realizes Sagan likes Naya, so he tells Sagan that Naya chose to be his PPO, despite receiving multiple offers from different groups. They are surprised when they see Sitara walk in, because it's the first time she has attended any of his fights. Sagan knows she feels bad about the leaked audio, but he doesn't blame her at all. Then ranked 23 fighter Freddy Alvarez volunteers to fight in place of Sagan's opponent. And oh my, the positions these two were in had my coochie steaming, y'all. Sagan wins the fight. Of course, Alvarez goes down to the 46th rank, and Sagan still stands strong. Look at all the black folks rooting for Sagan. Just one more fight, and he'll make it to the finals. Then, a man tries to stab him, but the skinny twink Naya is able to stop the giant man just in time and immediately calls for backup. The man is a Urianite who thinks that Sagan is the devil. Dr. Bruno wants to file a case against the administration, but Steph explains that nothing is confidential in Shalom Stadium. Commander Zimmer is running out of options, so she visits the rank 1 fighter, Ammon. She tells Ammon they can't have a godless man be champion, so he should defeat Sagan. Alvarez, who just fought Sagan, says that the young man was very strong and that Sagan could have beat him up early on in the fight. But Zimmer doesn't care. People are already searching humanism online because of Sagan, and if he enters the final, Zimmer is worried they'll never get rid of him. Even rank 2, Nizar, and rank 3, Mestre, are talking about Sagan. Mestre thinks that Sagan is like a prophet who fights against evil, and because of that, everyone wants him dead. But Nizar doesn't think the same. Still, he can't wait to see if Ammon will win. Mestre is fine. This movie is just filled with eye candy. Naya says Sagan has an IQ of 182, speaks multiple languages, and has photographic memory. But Sagan can't brag about this because he's genetically modified. Even though Commander Zimmer has talked to Ammon, she wants to ensure Sagan will be dead. She orders Captain Davis to enforce Code 16, which states they have to use force against someone who is a threat to international security. Zimmer insists that Sagan needs to be gone if they want peace to prevail. Then she has a note delivered to Nigel before the fight begins. Nigel whispers something to Ammon, and before the duel starts, Ammon shakes Sagan's hand. Sagan goes into a trance again, and Ammon grabs this chance to attack him. Only when Sagan wakes up does he get to fight back. Just then, a security officer shoots him with an arrow. Luckily, he's able to catch it in time and get Ammon to tap out. Because of what happened, Sagan's parents want him to drop out, but Sagan reminds them that he was created solely for the purpose of winning the tournament, and he's not going to leave. Then Sitara finally reveals that the only reason she was cold towards her son was because she was ashamed of herself. She created Sagan to fight even at a young age, so Sagan hugs her to show that he doesn't hate her. The incident gets everyone talking. After that failed attempt, Captain Davis reports herself to the investigation committee. On their way back to the hotel, Steph tells the story to Sagan. Naya later explains that it was not a real story but a secret message. They know they are being watched. Later that night, Naya shares that all groups that will participate in the tournament have to submit a manifesto detailing what the world will look like under their rule. She says that only the IHS will allow the practice of other faiths even if they win. On top of that, no religious group will be exempt from paying taxes and religion won't be taught in schools, but people can practice in private. Even though Naya believes in God, she has picked the IHS because it's grounded in humanity. Mestre and Nizar want to help Sagan, so they have their PPOs gather intelligence. The next morning, Sagan is overjoyed that the Temu Joe Rogan asked to do an interview with him. Just before they head to the stadium, Naya has already found out about the snipers waiting for Sagan. But before they leave the hotel, Mestre and Nizar offer to protect him, knowing he's in danger. Because of the attempts, a delegation headed by General Huda orders Zimmer to stop the attacks. Just then, the group leaves the hotel using reflective mirrors to protect Sagan. Commander Zimmer doesn't want to back down. She says that Sagan, who is supposedly a godless fighter, suddenly joins the wildcard, leaks an audio of him confessing he hears God, and a few days after, other fighters are treating him like a prophet. Zimmer thinks they are being played, but the delegation reminds her she can't just kill people based on a hunch. So Zimmer is forced to call off the assassination. Nizar tells the reporter that they protected Sagan only because they want to fight him themselves. Nizar wants to end Sagan to show people that he's just human and not a prophet. So Mestre agrees to fight first. General Huda says there was no conspiracy after all and calls Zimmer a Darth Karen in Arabic. The man is like, you know Zimmer is fluent in Arabic, and Huda is shady because she been known. The fight isn't as easy as his others, Mestre showing some capoeira dance moves. So I just know the package is big. Still, Sagan still wins. Unfortunately, Sagan's right rib cage is fractured. He refuses to give up. When he's finally alone in the room, he asks that if it's really God who is talking to him, he badly needs his help right now. Nazar is Sagan's next opponent. He knows that Sagan's in pain, but that doesn't stop him. The fight is heavy, and Nazar is winning. But in the end, Sagan turns things around and defeats him. Everyone celebrates Sagan's win, but when Fix Huntley goes online to congratulate him, he suddenly gets cut off from the screen. Captain Davis then announces that a terrorist attack happened, intended to kill Fix Huntley. The next day, Fix Huntley meets up with Sagan for an interview. He is safe. It turns out that someone blew up his studio, but he wasn't there, and only played a pre-recorded video of himself. He thinks that Sagan knew what was about to happen, which is why Sagan insisted that the interview happen the next day. So Fix left the night before, and that saved him from being blown to pieces. But Sagan doesn't have any answer to this. Though Fix thinks that Sagan is hearing a voice, he lets it go and stops questioning him. Was it God? The movie ends on that note. I actually quite enjoyed this one. A reminder that we should be able to practice whatever beliefs we have, as long as it doesn't harm anyone else. What did you guys think?
Hey, if you like this video, make sure you subscribe now and turn on the notification because YouTube isn't recommending my videos. And if you like to watch more foolishness, click here or here.